Hello and welcome to the Five Factors Podcast. I am Tal Prince here with everyone's favorite affirmation guru, Matt Adair. Matt, how are you?
I feel like a shorter Tony Robbins today. I am happy. I am in a good
Wow.
mood. I feel like spreading a lot of love and happy vibes and happy beeps. If you watch the last Star Wars movie, I am in a fantastic mood. How are you?
I'm right now. I'm actually curious.
I feel like you don't believe me.
Well, that's why I'm curious as to what is driving this happiness today. Is it the bottle that is on your desk? Is it some other force working inside of you at the moment?
I do have a fantastic bottle of scotch on my desk. I am not day drinking. It's not one of those days. I'm just in a good mood, and I'm trying to evolve. We've already discussed with everybody that I am a robot, but I don't think I'm supposed to stay a robot. So I'm growing. I want people to be encouraged. I want them to be affirmed. I want them to feel like what they're hearing right now is one big, gigantic hug coming from me.
Wow. Okay, this is fantastic for me just to listen to, and just because I know you so well. So it's really entertaining, as the wry smile on your face would indicate. But we are talking about encouragement affirmation today. That is really kind of what we want to get to. Matt, tell our listeners why we've chosen to talk about encouragement and affirmation today.
Well, the whole thing that we're doing on the podcast is trying to have a conversation with church leaders because we want to help you build a great church. We want to help you build an even greater life. And so what we really wanted to do today was we wanted to encourage you. I mean, it's a couple of weeks after Easter, and everybody walks into Easter hopeful. Maybe this is the year where revival breaks out. The next great awakening starts in our church on Easter Sunday. That didn't happen. The high tide of attendance has passed. It's still like 2 Sundays later, and we're kind of creeping back to normal. And life in ministry it kind of feels pretty ordinary. And we're getting closer to summer, and summer for a lot of us in ministry in our churches as people head out on vacation and travel, and they're not as involved, not as engaged as they might be at other times during the year. I mean, that can be pretty discouraging and depressing. So what we want to do on this episode today is we want to help you, and here's how we want to help you. One, we just want to acknowledge that nobody else, not even people on your staff, other leaders, board, elders, deacons, maybe nobody else acknowledges that this is kind of a difficult time. Maybe nobody's even paying enough attention to how you feel to be able to know that you feel a little discouraged right now. So we just want to know, we see you, we know how that works. And even if it isn't true for you, there might be other people on your team. There are other pastors in your city, other pastors in your tribe who feel that way. So this may not resonate with where you are today, but I think that empathetically, you might know that, well, I mean, I'm sure other people feel that way. And so maybe I could pick up on something that will maybe encourage them. Because really, I mean, I think what we're trying to do is help build next steps, because we're kind of coming from this with this idea, kind of the old saying that nobody has ever been encouraged too much. So maybe that's a good place for us to start, Tal. So there's that phrase, no one has ever been encouraged too much. I can't remember where or who said it first that I paid attention to and heard. But my big question for you is that statement true?
In a word, no. I don't. I don't believe. I don't believe that's true because I believe there's some danger to that, and it's going to come down to balance, like so many things. But there are plenty of people who would say they cannot be encouraged too much, but those people can tend to be, and I say those people as if I am not one of them. I have been this guy, for many years, where it is everything I do is angling to kind of get affirmation, to kind of get encouragement. And when encouragement is my goal, when encouragement or affirmation is my agenda for the day, guess what? You're not going to be able to do it too much, because the fact is I can't get enough. And so that's an issue. So, it's more about insecurity. So if my motivation is to get affirmation and encouragement, you're not going to be able to encourage me too much. And in fact, you're not going to be able to encourage me enough, because that's something that's going on inside of me. The ethos of that statement is absolutely correct in terms of, you know what, we probably don't encourage people enough, and we're not affirming people that work with us and underneath us and above us. We're not affirming them enough. So I would say, as we hear that statement, it's true for me as a giver of encouragement that I can't encourage somebody too much. For me as a receiver, that's a dangerous statement.
Yeah, I think that's a really kind of helpful way to think about it. But it is complicated, right? So, probably, over the last several weeks, I've had conversations with 5 people completely disconnected from one another who had been in ministry for a while and then stepped out within the last year. And so that was curious to me. So I just kind of wanted to follow up on them and different stories, different presenting reasons, different primary reasons. But one of the common threads that they all said independently, I didn't ask any kind of fishing questions, but they all told me on some level that one of the things that drove them out of not only the church they were in, but out of vocational ministry altogether was the fact that it was so rare and uncommon for them to receive any personal, particular affirmation, for them to be encouraged about particular things, other than just good sermon, pastor, by the person who says good sermon, pastor, every single Sunday. So there wasn't anybody that felt like they were paying attention to what they were doing. And that really kind of began to grind on them. So the impact on them was they felt like they began to experience discouragement, a lack of courage, that they began to isolate because it became more and more difficult to walk out in front of people, trying to help, trying to serve, but feeling like nobody was noticing, that nobody was appreciating it.
Right.
And out of that isolation, there became a real sense of a lack of vulnerability, that they began to feel it in their personal relationships, began to even see it in their preaching, where they weren't willing to put themselves in a position to be ignored, that they were basically building walls around them to keep from experiencing that pain. Now, and so the reason I'm saying this is not just to pass on their story, but it is because if you're listening to this, it might be a little bit of a dog whistle, and all of a sudden you just perked up and you're like, what? Wait a minute. So I'm tracking with you, people leaving, people isolating, people not getting enough verbal encouragement. And the impact on that is what we're really talking about here in that sense of discouragement. So if you're hearing this and you're wondering whether or not you're beginning to creep into a posture of discouragement, which is problematic, coach us up here a little bit in terms of some signs of discouragement for us. If we hear anything in that story and we go, I'm wondering if that's me.
Yeah, and it's interesting, this whole line too, because I saw you post that, and then I'll post it back. This is the number one reason men have affairs. For men that commit adultery within their marriages, the number one reason comes down to, I wasn't feeling appreciated, taken for granted. And that's a real thing. And so these are a lot of the things that I work through with couples that are in before that hits. They're in for preventative maintenance, which is the best time, by the way, to be getting couples counseling is before you need couples counseling. So those of you who think
stop and say that again so the people in the back can hear you.
Yeah. The time to seek couples counseling is before you need couples counseling. That is I'm telling you, I know so many people go, oh, we don't need any counseling right now. I'm telling you, there's going to be a point where you probably do. But the time to get there is long before you need it. When you need it, usually things have gone to the ditch and things have been burned, and there are things that have happened that you can't take back.
So before we let that rabbit completely go across the other side of the road, so help the person who goes, I know, everybody should, but help that person who is experiencing some patterns in their marriage that says, no, you absolutely need to be there, and you're just not realizing it yet. So there are a couple of patterns that are happening in marriages where it's like it's still preventive, like the wheels aren't off, but the tires are a little underinflated.
It's usually going to take the form of just kind of some nagging annoyance, something that's just kind of bothering you. Geez, the marriage feels more like work today. than it has in a while. And then that starts to kind of set in like a fog bank, where it's just like, Jesus, just work now. And I don't know. And, so those things are what you want to look for, as to, okay, now it's time to absolutely call. Would be great if you called before. My best case scenario is that you never pick up any warning signs.
Yeah.
And the best way to avoid picking up any warning signs is to stave off warning signs, by being, regular, with your spouse in couples counseling. It's a great idea. It's a great preventative, and it's good for the marriage. Does that mean every week? No, you can. I mean, I've got clients that are couples. They come in once a quarter, once every 6 months, just for a tune-up, a checkup, just for somebody on the outside to ask some probing questions about the relationship and work actively at uncovering any hidden areas of resentment, any feelings of not feeling appreciated, because I'm always looking for that. Looking for discouragement in the relationship. And how we get there is some of the things that we look for are the same things that we look for in some of this just discouraged, these kind of signs of, hey, how's somebody tracking? Are they getting discouraged? This is good for you. It's good for to watch people on your staff. It's good to watch in all of your relationships, your kids, your spouse. So these are some warning signs. Are you noticing a depressed mood most of the day, several days in a row? Are you starting to notice that? And, what's a depressed mood? Lack of motivation, irritability. Men particularly show depression as anger. So if you are a man and you're listening to the podcast and you're noticing, geez, I've been really irritable and angry for several days, that's a pretty good indicator there may be some depression there that's worth assessing. Because anger, most men don't know how to really do a lot of emotion, and anger is a quick, easy go-to. So when we see a lot of anger in a male, we start to look for depression. So look for that for yourself. Women, anger doesn't really come that way. But if they're in a depressed mood, if you're a woman and you're listening and you're feeling just kind of down and blue several days in a row, and that's becoming really common, that's a sign that discouragement is around. You want to look for the source of that. Another one is diminished interest in pleasurable activities. Now, that's not, just every day. It's most of the day. Okay. Because there are a lot of pleasurable activities that you'll take part in, and many of them in an addictive fashion, especially when you're discouraged. When you're discouraged, it's easy to turn to things like pornography, food, alcohol. It's easy to turn to those things, but you're engaged in pleasure for a very short amount of time in that. It's really not about the pleasure as much as it is about the escape. So what we're talking about is a reluctance or a disinterest in engaging in something that is truly pleasurable. A walk through a garden, coffee with your spouse, something that you typically enjoy doing, watching a fantastic Premier League soccer game, for instance. So activities that are pleasurable. If you're not wanting to engage in any of those most of the day, and that's going on for several days, that's a real big sign of discouragement. Also, a longer window is if you're noticing a 5% or more change in weight over the period of a month. Okay. Now, that excludes if you're intentionally trying to lose weight. But if you are just inexplicably, there's a 5% shift in your weight, and there's so many good ways to track your weight now. So, so many of the smart scales and the tie into to all the apps on the phones. It's fantastic. So watch and see if your weight is tracking up or down more than 5% over the period of a month. If it is, that's a warning sign. Something to take a really close look at. Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you sleeping too much, or are you sleeping not enough? Either extreme is a warning sign here. And then my favorite one, the thing is probably really subtle that a lot of people miss. It's the big fancy $5 term is psychomotor agitation.
I use that one 3 times a week.
I know that you do, and I know that you say that because you're trying to affirm and encourage me right now, because that is your goal today, and you're doing fantastic. So psychomotor agitation. This is unintentional, purposeless motion. Okay? Think about it like this. Are you pacing? Are you wringing your hands? Are you chewing your nails? A lot of people for psychomotor agitation, when discouraged, agitated, or depressed, will start to pull hair. So they'll pull hair on their head, they'll pull eyelashes, they'll pull eyebrows, arm hair, anything that they can get. But it's unintentional and it has zero purpose. So if you're seeing a lot of unintentional, purposeless motion, that's a big warning sign. So these are the things we really want to take a look at as to let you know if this is trending towards away from just being discouraged into a more depressed mode. And that's where you really start to get into trouble.
Yeah. So again, here's what we're doing. We're basically trying to say, look, if you hear us say, no one has ever been encouraged too much, and you go, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily feel like I'm receiving that kind of encouragement. So I'm starting to maybe feel a little bit discouraged. I'm not as engaged in the work, all that type of stuff. We just basically said, hey, here's some things to be looking for. Depressed mood. Number 1. Number 2, diminished interest in pleasurable activities. Number 3, change in weight 5% up or down in a month. Number 4, trouble sleeping. Number 5, psychomotor agitation. Basically, yes. You're just kind of, there's a lot of motion that's there for no good reason. And so those are just some things clinically to be able to help you get beyond just maybe you're just feeling fatigued or just something like that. Like we're trying to basically say, hey, let's bring it down a little bit. And so when you know, hey, we really need to do some work here, that this isn't just one of those things that happens and you just have a bad night. But this is something that you really, really need to pay attention to. So let's do this, Tal. Let's talk a little bit about how to help somebody kind of rebuild courage. And I think this will be helpful for a couple of reasons. Number 1, if you do find yourself kind of taking some steps downward into some of these things, you're noticing some of these things, we want to help you kind of take some first steps out of this back to where you want to be, which is to live courageously. And again, my functional definition of courage is basically you being yourself. And you basically having the courage to be able to stand up and be seen and to not hide, to not isolate yourself, to not try to be somebody else. So all the language of transparency and vulnerability that you hear us talk about a lot, that's what we're talking about here. So we want to give you a couple things here that could be helpful for you. It could be helpful for you with somebody on your team. It could be helpful for a friend of yours who's a pastor somewhere else, a church leader somewhere else, and maybe you can encourage him with this. So here are a few things that I've got, and then we'll see what else Tal has. Number 1 is to really invest in building a culture of encouragement within your church. For some of us, we are in church cultures that are low honor cultures, and it isn't just the fact that they don't honor the pastor, they don't honor anybody. That there's very little sense of verbal affirmation, very little sense of verbal gratitude. And so if you're the leader, lead, model this, okay? Teach on it when it's there in the scriptures. Encourage, pray for it, but absolutely think about this not just happening for you, but what happens if you have a church that's known as a family of encouragers. And so you basically set the tone, you lead the way, and you ask for God's help to make that. That's number 1, building a culture of encouragement. Secondly is to protect time with those who encourage you. Find the people in your life who consistently bring out the best in you, that make you want to stand a little bit taller, that make you really believe that you belong, that you matter, and they find ways verbally, non-verbally to encourage you. Protect that time. Be intentional with that time. Don't let that person be the person that you don't talk to for 6 months because you're dealing with everybody else's stuff. Make that happen and protect that time. I think it's absolutely critical and vital. And then the third thing is, and I don't mean this as some kind of put it on a coffee cup or a t-shirt, I really mean listen to Jesus. One of the things I think is happening in my life is this is one of those seasons where I'm actually believing that Jesus is real, like an actual person who's with me. And so call it mystical, call it whatever you want. But I really believe that, yes, through the scriptures, but in other ways, if you're listening to Jesus, that he's essentially, look, I see you and you're awesome. So keep doing you. And you just keep doing that. And just know and see in ways theologically precise, or just maybe even a little bit sloppy, that Jesus loves you. And when you and I hear him say that and demonstrate that to us, when we don't just know that he loves us, but we're experiencing that, that's ultimately going to be the thing that we can't get anywhere else. That goes back to what you're saying earlier, Tal, right? Which is, hey, you know what? If you're just sitting there craving encouragement because you're seeking affirmation, you can't get that from any other human being to the degree that you need it, but you can from Jesus.
Right.
And so those are a few things for me that if you're just if you want to develop this, if you want to build this out, if you want to kind of take some next steps with that, that's a couple of things that I had in mind. Tal, what did you have?
Yeah, well, I really like to build a culture of encouragement, and one simple thing you can do that is in your regular meetings, your regular staff meetings, and in your home, is rotate through the staff, rotate through the family, and have one person set aside once a week, once a month, once a quarter. Because if you got 3-member staff and you're going to do this once a week, it's going to get really painful fast, because you're going to say the same thing. It's like, I like your hair, but because pretty soon you run out of encouraging things to say. I don't know, interesting shirt choice, but or if it's Matt, you can compliment his taste in scotch, but set it up on whatever regular time frame, but make it a calendared item. Where you rotate through the staff, rotate through the family, and put one person in the middle, and everyone's going to say something encouraging or affirming to that member. It's really easy, but it's a thoughtful way to go about it. The intentionality is what's critical to build that culture. What I would say too is go back to the feelings wheel. We've talked about this a bunch here on the podcast. We're really big believers in the feelings wheel, and that feelings wheel that we have in the resources. That one, what I love about that is if you check in with yourself emotionally using that wheel, it's going to let you know, are my needs being met or are they not being met? And that's a really important thing to know, because if my needs are not being met, there's a real strong possibility that I'm in one of those things that I need is encouragement and affirmation.
Yeah.
Because when I'm discouraged, think about how you feel when no one's encouraged you or affirmed you. Look at that left side of that feelings wheel and tell me how many of those you're currently feeling. It's going to be a bunch of them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's important. We'll link up to the feelings wheel if you don't have that yet. Just look at the show notes, and we'll basically just let you hit a button with your thumb, and you can download that and have access to that. It's a tool that we use all the time. We teach it. We think it's absolutely critical and vital. One of the things that's interesting, I'm looking at it right here. You don't see discouraged as a word on here, right? I mean, basically discouraged is a posture that is a gateway into some of these other feelings and how you think through that. And so I think that's an opportunity for us to really dive in a little bit deeper on that. I think that's really, really helpful.
Discouraged matches up to afraid.
Yeah.
And so think about that. I mean, think about that for the moment, that if people on your staff or you or people in your family are feeling discouraged, they're feeling afraid.
Yeah.
To encourage somebody quite literally means to give them courage. So how would I give you courage? Ask that question when you're trying to encourage or affirm someone. What do they need? Where do they need courage? How can I help give them courage there? That's a real powerful thing to be able to give somebody, a wonderful gift.
Yeah, I think that this could really get flat. So I've got somebody that I know that I appreciate the fact that they use words like I'm grateful, but they use it for everything and everyone. And so to me, it strikes a little hollow at some point, and
right.
And so just be careful on this when we talk about encouraging and discouraging. Like, you can go sideways, but like that's a problem for down the road. Like, let's put some put our shoulder into this and take some steps forward for yourself, for your church, and really begin to change the culture of this, because, really in the end, what's at stake is everybody's life and work, including yours. If you're listening to this, your life and ministry is absolutely at stake, because I just told you stories of people who walked away from vocational ministry in part because they had lost their courage and they couldn't get it back. And so if we can create communities where we are encouraging one another, this isn't just about being friendly so more people can come to your church. This isn't just about creating, shutting the back door so people won't leave. No, real things, like real vital things, like people's lives are at stake here. So we want to take this seriously. And so one of the things we want to do is we want to help you, as we said earlier, build a great church and an even better life. So we've created a resource that we hope will help you take some of the things we've talked about and put it together. So if you'll go to fivefactors.net/encourage, then we'll talk more. We'll talk more about how to develop courage, some of the things that we just kind of ran through fairly quickly. We'll deep dive a little bit more on that, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of these warning signs when you're looking to others for courage and not listening to Jesus. Because I do think, like, as concerned as I am for the person who isn't being encouraged by people enough, I am equally, if not more so, worried about the person who is so hungry and craving for affirmation from anywhere that they'll actually miss the fact of what Jesus is doing to encourage them, and they will basically whore themselves out to whoever or whatever will give them that sense of affirmation. And as Tal said earlier, this is the kind of stuff that gets us in a lot of trouble, the kind that gets you fired, the kind that really change the trajectory of your life, and the stuff that just creates chronic problems for you.
Can't get you sent to rehab.
Yeah, that too. So,
I've been told.
Right. So go to fivefactors.net/encourage, and we want to be able to help you recover the courage that you were made to have. Tal, any last words for today?
I think that's it, man. It's going to come down to believing, really, as you mentioned earlier, believing that Jesus is who he says he is, that he actually likes me, he's actually for me. And how do we encourage one another in the Lord? How do we encourage each other in Christ? How do we do that? That helps avoid it getting flat, and doing that. How do I encourage this brother, this sister in the Lord? How do I do that? And it builds deeper relationships, so when we're talking about relational health, one of the best ways you can do this is through being a strong encourager, but a sincere one. But also on the other end, it can get dangerous if you're craving it and wanting it and seeking it. At the end of the day, if I have to look at it like this, and it may sound a little bit harsh, but this is how I had to do, because this was a major issue in my world for a very, very long time. And when I'm unhealthy, I can go right back here. It's one of the quick warning signs that hey, I need to tighten things up. Is if I'm wanting encouragement and I'm craving encouragement and affirmation, what can really be happening there is I am wanting the worship from others that is due Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm wanting them to worship and appreciate me. And that's a real big problem. That's something we got to look out for.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, y'all. So the takeaway for this episode is just to remind you that you're not that brave. You can't generate courage on your own. That you absolutely need other people to build the courage that you need, and you can be the person who invests in other people to help them build the courage that they need, so that all of us can follow Jesus together in the world and the life that he's called us to. So again, go to the show notes. We've got everything linked up in there, including that free resource, and you can go there, Feelings Wheel, everything that we're creating here to help you develop and build courage into your life and the lives of other people. Next week, we're going to have a real fun episode as we talk about how large churches screw up small churches. And unintentionally, usually, but still, I'm not backing away from it. Large churches, we love you. You have a tendency to screw up small churches. So we're going to talk about that next week. And so if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, you might as well go ahead and do that. And then next Monday, then the episode will just show up wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And while you're there, we'd love for you to go ahead and rate and review our podcast. The rating is going to help more and more people know about this podcast so we can help more church leaders like you. And also, any reviews that we get are great feedback for us. It also helps people know that this is a really good, helpful place for people to continue to learn what it looks like to build a great church and an even better life. So we'll come back next week, but between now and then, take the stuff that you've heard today, put in the work, and we'll see you on the next episode of the 5 Factors Podcast.